And on the right here, though, is an example of what we're going to be building. So it's a live demo. We'll build an AI agent in real time. Okay, so when we think about a task and which task to pick, this to sort of product managers will be rather normal, right? We very often think about the time or the money saved, and very often time and money are interrelated, right? And that's at the organizational level. I think when we think about all the kinds of tasks we could automate, before we scope them down and build them, we tend to not think so much about our own personal experience in those tasks. So the first thing I would say when you're considering before you automate anything is also have a lens for that a task might alleviate or tasks that you might procrastinate on. Identifying a good task to automate before we go and realize that, right? And I think there's three things that I like to think of. This is very similar to other triaging processes for picking, what to do, like if you're in engineering and whatnot. So time saved, obviously just talked about that. That's a really important one because for your time, there's a dollar value associated to it, right? So that's obvious. Then there's also the feasibility of that task, right? Something might be really valuable to automate, but doesn't mean it's particularly easy to do so. Privacy is really important. In the propensity for damage, right? If you're new to this, which I'm assuming you are to some extent because you're watching the stream right now, there's certain automations or processes you could implement that could be more dangerous to implement, that could destruct user data, interact with the users. That's kind of another lens to think about this. And so when I'm thinking about defining good task, I consider these three things. And then as a final lens, I think about the joy, the dread that task either could create or remove, right? So that's adding that kind of human element to that task. And that's in particular to a task that, let's say, you're doing at your job, which I would say is the best place to start before you're getting into processes that are mission critical and involve a lot of different stakeholders. And one way you can identify this list of tasks, maybe you're very good at that and already have a list, but one thing I've told a lot of users over time they found helpful is imagine there's a panic button underneath your desk. And for a week or two, every time you press that panic button under your desk, maybe it's after you get off a call and you have one of those reports that Wade mentioned, maybe you're pressing your panic button because then you're doing some manual stuff there. Note down that moment and consider maybe the time saved and the feasibility of that task, but just write some quick notes on that. And then from there, you can identify the couple things that you could possibly automate, right? So here I've got three different examples. I want to reply to comments that are coming from all the different channels, from people writing on my content, for example. It could be from internals as well, right? I want to keep up on competitors. We got great competitors like Zapier and Make doing stuff all the time. I want to keep up on the kinds of things that they're doing. And I might want to also distribute content. As a staff dev rel, that's a lot of my job right now. Now, the best thing to do at this point is really try to cut out some of these tasks. You got a small list. So there, I would recommend filtering this by the propensity for danger first to already remove some things. So for example, maybe distributing content isn't something we want to do, or rather, replying to comments isn't something that we want to do because replying to our users live without some kind of human in the loop or something, maybe that's a little messier, a little more risk for my own voice and brand. So let's say we remove that and we're left with two things. We can then go through those different dimensions I referenced earlier and think about how much time those take per month or how much time they could be saved by automating that, the feasibility of doing so, and the propensity for damage. So between these two tasks, distributing content, keeping up on competitors, I think keeping up on competitors is far more feasible. It's pulling some stuff from public and basically using AI to categorize that and turn that into something chunkable and readable. It also doesn't interact with my own systems or interact with customers itself. So its propensity for damage is pretty low. So that's the one that I'm going to pick. That's the task that I do manually right now, let's say. Then once we've identified a task, we can discover it real quick and scope it down so we know the V1 that we're building. So we're kind of doing that thoughtfully. So to do that, you can do this in a flowchart. You can do this on paper. You can list it, whatever works for your brain. But in this task, basically, I have a Notion doc. Periodically, every day, honestly, to be when it comes to me, I'm going on LinkedIn, I'm going on socials, I'm checking those competitors, putting them in to the Notion doc, doing the same with their newsletters. And then every 2 weeks on average, kind of trying to aggregate that up, all manually right now. So already at this point, I'm going to start scoping down. I don't think I need to add the newsletters in. Because I know this process, it's my process, I know a lot of the same information is found on social and in there. So we're going to skip that. And And then we can think about the tools that we could use for these, right? So the Notion doc, I'm going to move into Gmail because it's an easy place to send this to. I can forward it to other people and whatnot. So I'm going to pick that, although we could automate this with Notion as well. I'm going to use Appify to be checking on the LinkedIn pages because they've got some easy sources for scraping that kind of data. And then the aggregating into categories and stuff, I'm going to use an LLM for that because it's pretty good at taking a bunch of sort of text and turning that noise into some signal. So then we get down to basically a scope. My first solution, it's going to be an agent that has a tool. The tool is going to fetch stuff from LinkedIn, so I could add more tools in future because this is just a V1. I might have a newsletter tool in future. And then I need my AI agent to take a list of my competitors' URLs and then take their posts, group them by categories that are relevant to me, and then send an HTML formatted email. So we've identified it, we've scoped it. Now let's switch into n8n and build this use case out. Okay, so I'm inside of n8n right now, and I've got two empty workflows right now. I've got the agent and the tool. So we'll go ahead and build the tool first. So I'll open that up. And in here right now, I've just got a sticky note that I created, again, with the scope in there to kind of keep me on focus while I'm building. I'm going to build this out manually, but we do have an AI workflow builder as well, where you could do this automatically as well. I think when you're starting out, though, it is helpful to build this out so you understand what you're doing. All right, so we'll click the plus here to add a trigger to my workflow. Triggers start my workflow. And since this is going to be run by an AI agent, another workflow on my instance, I'm going to choose the when executed by another workflow trigger. And I've added that to the canvas now. I can move it around. I can double click on it to configure it, for example. And in here, the way this trigger works is it expects one-to-many inputs for the workflow. This is what my AI agent populates at runtime so we can use this tool. So since we need this tool to return posts for a company profile, we can call this the company or the LinkedIn company URL. I'm going with a pretty verbose name because an AI is going to read this list. So this is good context for it. I'm not just going to write URL because it's a bit more specific. If we run this, we see it emanated some data. This is the schema that's going to be flowing through my workflow that I can use downstream. It's currently set to a null value here. So I'm actually going to edit this, put in a proper value that I can work with right now. So let me just paste one from my copy board. It's n8n's LinkedIn for now. I'll make that proper JSON. I'll save that. This data is now pinned. I could unpin it. It's shown in purple now. So each time I run this, it's just going to output that, which is great for testing. Okay, so next, we need to make a call to go get these posts. For this, I'm going to use Appify. It's not an endorsement necessarily. There's lots of different browser use and sort of scraping tools that you could use in n8n. But I found this great LinkedIn post scraper that's cheap, easy to use, and reliable. So I'll click the plus. I'll go into action in an app because that's the next step that I need to do here. And then I'll search for Appify. And then from here, basically Appify's different services that they have are called actors. Actors return data sets. So I'm going to pick the run an actor and get data set action here. Just going back to the canvas to contextualize this, my actor step, my Appify step is now connected to my trigger, and the item of data with the LinkedIn URL is flowing into there. So now I got to set up the step. I've already got a connection to Appify here. If you didn't, you would just create new, connect your account, and you'd be good to go. And then from here, I need to pick the actual actor itself. I've already got it here because I was searching for this earlier, but I would just search for it, right? So I'll click that. Now, each actor has an input JSON. This is kind of the input parameters to run that step. From within Appify, they have an example here. So I'll copy that. As you can see, it's got various sort of metadata, the URL to scrape themselves. So let me just paste that in. Now, this is static right now. Two important things I need to manipulate. There's the scrape until. This is a date in the past. So if it's set to a week ago, it'll get posts from the last week. And then the URLs to scrape themselves. Since I want this to be dynamic and work, relative to the time it's run right now, let's add some expressions to this. That is, because this is all static right now. So we'll hit expression here. And in here, for the date, for example, I can clear this. And if I hit double brackets in n8n and hit a $, I can see the autocomplete in n8n. Now, this is JavaScript, but we've got some helper methods here. We've got one to get the time right now. So we can see in the result down here, it's got a datetime object that's emitting right now. That's not in the right format. It was in a year, month, day format. And we also need this to be a week ago. So we can use a method for subtracting 7 days. And it's an example of how to do this one here. So I'll do that. So now we've got a date that's 7 days in the past, and we'll apply another method. Again, there's autocomplete here to guide you through that, to format this. Again, there's an example of how to use this, but actually this default is already good. And here now we have a date that was 7 days in the past from right now. For the URL, this is something we want to map from that previous step in the workflow. So I'll actually open this up, just get a bit more room. We can clear this here, and actually we can just drag and drop that. And here we see what this would run for this run itself. I'm just going to turn the memory down because we don't need that much. Let's quickly test this. Now, what's going to happen is, unless n8n hasn't posted in the last week, which I really hope we have, this is going to return a bunch of posts. Now, these posts are pretty heavy. This is the raw JSON I'm seeing in here. I can see in schema view as well. What I need to do is kind of strip this down and make sure I've only got the relevant information for my AI agent's task so that it's not getting bloated with all these extra tokens. So what happens by default is the last node, as we call them, in your workflow will return its children that it's emitting. So there's 16 items, 16 posts coming out right now. It's going to return that to whoever is calling this workflow. In that case, our AI agent. So what we can do is add another node. And since we want to transform the data coming out of this step before it goes back to its parent, we can go into data transformation here and add on an edit fields node. Now, how this node works is you can access all the input data coming in. We could have it pass through, but by default, it doesn't. So what we could do is just drag and drop the fields we do actually want to keep. We can even rename them. So here I'm going to say post text, because again, this is data that our AI agent is going to see. So we're going to add just a little bit more verbosity to that so it understands semantically what it means. There's a bunch of individual comments and stuff. We don't need that for the V1 right now. We do want the number of shares, number of likes, and number of comments as well. Now, I also want my email to have sources and links so I can go check those posts out. So let's go ahead and add the URL of the post as well. Now, again, I'm scraping social posts here, but depending on what you're doing, I'm showing you how you fetch data, sort of aggregate it, clean it up. So this source can be anything. It could be Jira, it could be other channels, right? It doesn't have to be this use case. Okay, so this is all done now. We can just test this last step by running it. And we can see now we've got much smaller items coming out, which is the things that we need. So we'll go ahead and publish this. Now that my tool is published, let's go back into my project here. Let's go into my AI agent, which is the blank workflow. And now let's build the AI agent that's going to consume this tool, right? Well, and the nice thing is just to sort of why I built this as a separate tool, because I could have built this in one workflow, is I think that checking competitor posts is something I'm probably going to use in other agents and workflows. So now that's decoupled and I can evolve that tool independently, and then everything that uses it doesn't have to be updated as well. So again, here, what we want to do, we want to build an AI agent that consumes that tool. I want this to run once a week. I thought this would be a pretty cool pattern to show because a lot of people show AI agents that are chat-based that you interact with. You can do that in n8n as well. But I think these sort of passive background task agents are an interesting flavor to show folks as well. It's then going to have a tool to be able to interact with me via Gmail to send me the notification, and also context getting so it can get those posts. And I want to set this all up so that it can consume more, or rather I can add other insight sources in future. Maybe we're going to be checking other channels. Maybe we're going to checking the newsletters as we identified from my manual task. Maybe we want to send it to more locations like Slack and stuff as well in future. So I'm going to build this as an AI agent and not a step-by-step workflow, so that I don't have to rebuild that whole step-by-step workflow each time. I can instead add some new tools, change some prompting, and then my agent's off to the races. Okay, so let's click the plus. And since we want this to run once a week, the trigger that I'm picking is a schedule trigger. So I'll go ahead and drag that onto the canvas. And I'll set up the trigger. So we want this to run once a week. So we'll set that. I want this happening on Monday morning, ready for my week, to inform my week. Maybe Zapier put out a hot new feature that I need to get on top of before I plan my week. And then let's have this happen at like 6 a.m. because I'm not up at 6 a.m. So it'll be ready in time by the time I get up. Okay, we run this. This outputs some metadata that we won't really need for this use case, but just to show you again, n8n nodes output data, and those data can be referenced in downstream steps. So now that the workflow started, we need to add our AI agent. So we'll go over into the AI section of the nodes panel here. There's, again, a lot of other different stuff you can do with n8n. And we're going to pick an AI agent because we want it to use tools. If we weren't using tools, we just wanted an LLM step, we might use a basic chain or one of these dedicated ones from the very many different vendors that we support. So I'll drag and drop that AI agent onto the canvas. Now, there's going to be some setup inside the AI agent, but like I said, AI agents use tools. They also obviously need an LLM connected to them so they can think. So we'll set up those dependencies first, starting off with the LLM model that we want to use. So I'll click this plus, and as you can see, there's a lot of different models that we support here, and also gateways. So we also support open source models, etc. In this case, let's use Anthropic because I've been giving OpenAI a little too much love lately, and there's a lot of different fun models to play with. We won't use Ollie's credential because he lent it to me. We'll pick my one, but again, I could just add a new credential here. And for now, let's build with Sonnet 4.5, although I could scope down to Haiku, for example. In future, I do recommend starting with a bigger model. If it all works, then scope down because then you know what's actually affecting the outcome. All right, that's set up. We got a model. Now let's add the tool that we just created. So since that's a workflow in n8n, we're going to use the call n8n workflow tool. We could invoke an HTTP request. We can also do lots of different actions in an app. In this case, it's a custom tool we made. So we're going to add this tool here. Now, first thing we want to do is name our tool because our AI agent will see this. So let's call this call, or rather get LinkedIn company posts. And the description, this is the description that your AI agent is going to see to know whether it should run this tool or not, or how to run it. So I'm going to paste in one that I made earlier, like your favorite cooking show, so you don't watch me typing that all out. It's pretty simple. Call this tool to get LinkedIn posts for a given LinkedIn company URL, returns post for the last 7 days. So it's simple, but I have added in that it should expect to get posts for a given LinkedIn company URL. We start small, and if in future it's causing errors, like it's trying to add multiple URLs at once, and this doesn't support that, right? If this tool is for one URL, we could add more text in here, but I always recommend less to start. If it's working, do not add more. Then add more only if you need to. Otherwise, later down the line, if you have a regression or something's not working, you don't know what is affecting that. And sometimes a word or a sentence can totally affect the outcome here. So we'll pick the workflow that we want to call as the get LinkedIn company posts workflow here. And now we see that LinkedIn company URL that we set as the input. And for this, it's not something we're going to drag from our trigger because it's just a schedule trigger. This is something we want our AI to decide to populate. So to do that, we can press this button here. And now this is being automatically defined by the model each time it runs the tool. We could add a description, but we don't need to because the title, I think, is rather self-evident. Again, if we had an issue there, we could add that later. Okay, so this tool should be all set up. Now, we also need a Gmail tool so we can send that message to the user. So I'll go ahead and click this again. We'll go into action in an app, and we'll go ahead and search for Gmail. There's also a generic email tool if you just want to go over SMTP, but this one is a bit more fleshed out because it's using a Google API. Okay, once again, because we're connecting with a service, the first thing we'd have to set is the credential. I've got a nice test email here, but again, you could go and connect one and sign in with Google, and you'd be off to the races. Now, the tool description for these sorts of tools, native tools, are set automatically. So if I go to manual, you can see that it's set to send a message in Gmail. That's enough for now. If you're doing some really funky custom stuff in future, you might want to set a custom tool description, and you can do that. It's a nice thing about n8n. We kind of give you defaults, but then you can always access those options and settings and that kind of stuff if you need them. So we're sending a message, and in this case, we're going to send it to my test email. So I don't want AI to define this. And I think it's a really nice thing about how n8n has designed these tools. You opt in to what you give the AI control over. So for example, the subject is something I wanted to set. So we'll set that. And I will add a description here because I want it to be consistent in the kinds of description that it gives. And so again, I've got one I wrote earlier here. Always prefix subject with weekly competitor social insights and then a short synopsis. Again, can tweak that if we need to once we're testing. The type of email I want to send is an HTML email because I want it to have some nice formatting writing HTML. Obviously, if anyone's seen anything in Cursor, GenAI, it's very capable of doing that. And then the message text itself, of course, this is something that we want the AI to set. And here we will add a description again. And I'm just going to reiterate that this is the message to send to user and that I want it to be HTML formatted, because this option isn't part of this option here. My AI might not see that. So I'm just adding that in here. And again, as testing this, there's other issues that it's misusing it. Description is the first place where you want to put this, so it's closer to the thing it's using, not somewhere far away in your system prompt. Okay, so I've got a schedule trigger with an AI agent, an Anthropic chat model. We're sending a Gmail message, or we have the ability to do so with the tool. We also have the ability to fetch LinkedIn company posts. Now let's give our agent its actual task that it's doing. By default, this AI agent is set up to use a chat trigger. So in n8n, we have a new feature called a chat hub. It's basically ChatGPT inside of n8n, but it can talk to your own AI agents. So if this was a chat-based use case, I might add that chat trigger to my workflow and connect it like this, and then this AI agent will work by default. But in this case, I'm using the schedule trigger as an impulse, and so that user message, the thing I would type into ChatGPT, is the same each time. It's just the context from the given week is going to be different. So instead, the source for this prompt, for this user message, I'm going to define below. And now I'm going to, again, paste one in from earlier and walk you through it. So analyze the LinkedIn post from the following LinkedIn company profiles and send me a Gmail message summary. I then have statically some of our competitors. We've got Zapier and Make in here. Again, I could add more. And I'm not making this dynamic because this is use cases for myself. I might update this periodically. I'll go into the workflow, update it. If I change this to a chat-based AI agent, this whole message is being populated by me when I'm using it. So this is like a nice way to create these kinds of event-based agents or background agents where the task stays the same, or that task is perhaps grabbed from some steps earlier in the workflow. We see users use like an Airtable or some data table source, and they're actually dynamically creating this, kind of like you saw me combining that JSON with dynamic expressions earlier in the tool. Okay, so we've got a nice user message here, but we haven't defined what the email should look like, what it should group by and everything. So if I run this right now, it's basically an intern without any instructions. And so to add it instructions on how to do the task, we can add a system message. So the way I like to think of user message versus system message, this is the task itself that you gave your intern. This is the intern's guidebook, handbook on how to do things at your company. And you can't talk to your AI agent once it's got going. So this handbook better define the task pretty well. Okay, so let's expand this out for now so I can see my workflow and the system message. I'm gonna, again, with the time in this live build, I'm gonna paste one in and just kind of walk you through the key parts here. So you're a competitive intelligence analyst. We're giving it a role. This is called role prompting. It's a best practice, so it knows like the general context of who it is. Since this is a single task-based agent, I then just in kind of plain text have wrote what task it's going to be doing and what categories it should include. This could get more sophisticated if we have multiple different tasks. But again, this is a V1 and this is sufficient just for defining this one task. The other really key part that I am providing here that really sort of modulates the success of its output is an example of what the weekly update should look like. Examples arguably are far more useful than like writing a bunch of lists and rules. Here, I've used Markdown to kind of encapsulate the start and end of this example, and I provided two examples within that example email. I chose Zapier because that's going to be one that's in there. I kind of wrote in the voice and kind of the way, the prose that I wanted. I also made sure to include one that isn't going to be in this list, just so we're not overfitting the example. And then I have a few rules at the end here. Now, full disclosure, most of these rules were not added in my first version. Just this one here always includes source as an inline link. Usually rules are things that I'm adding as I'm iterating and testing on my use case. But just in the interest of time, I've added the rest here that happened from about 2-3 tests that I was building set to test. Okay, so let's run the workflow. And with any luck, I'm going to get a message in my inbox here. And if not, I'll show you how to troubleshoot that. So we can see that the chat model ran. And we can see actually in the logs here, we can see how that's breaking down. So our chat model ran. It invoked this company post tool. And it first did it for Make. It nexted it for Zapier and got the results back. It's now having another think and should next decide to use the Gmail node to send that message. Let's have a look. So if this is all successful, the next thing we could do is test with Haiku, because right now it's running in Sonnet, so it's going to take a little bit longer. But again, because it's a background task, if this takes a minute or 90 seconds, there's ways I could optimize this, right? These run in sequence. I could probably create a bulk action, make that tool a bit more complicated. In fact, I did when I was designing this out at first, but I realized that it might be a bit more complicated to show you right now and less realistic if I was actually just building this the first time myself, without 6 years of experience on building this kind of stuff. So this all executed, we can see green lights, the AI agent outputted, kind of in ChatGPT style, said what it would do. Now let's go over my inbox and let's check that out. Okay, it's abided by the subject line. We see Zapier's been busy, good stuff, Wade. We see Make as well. Let's check the links that they work. Great, this is opening a real Zapier post, so nothing got broken there. Fantastic. So from here, essentially, I've built my use case. I've tested it. We could test it a few more times, but I want to make sure we have time for some Q&A. So what we do now is simply publish this. We can give it a version like V1. I can describe those changes well. Could publish it. And now what I might do is, if I start getting issues or problems or things I want to do with this, I might start already in the sticky note for V2 discussing those things that I'd like to do, so I can kind of track that in line. If this becomes a big use case with lots of different people using it and n8n, this might be a Notion doc or in Confluence or something, and it might have a link to it. But now, essentially, I've got this running. I could add evaluations and other things in future, but I've got a nice V1 that is set up to accept these more tools as I add them, accept more capability, perhaps accept more triggers. So there's different ways to consume it. And just before we finish up, I'll go into the tool as well to show you where you can check those runs, or executions, as we call them in n8n. We can see where we were building this. There was some test executions. These last two from the run we just did for the tool, these are production runs, so we don't see that anymore here. So here we can see that this one was the make.com run. We can see that raw data in here. We could import that into my workflow, modify, update this tool, publish it, and now my agent will use the new version of that tool. So this is how you identify, scope, and build a use case